July 4th edition of the Ahavas Chessed class. Today's class we're going to pick up with part 2, chapter 20, and we're going to talk about giving lots of money to tzedakah. So we're going to continue our discussion of, we talked about previously Meiser Ksafim. We talked about giving up to 20%. And now we're going to talk even further about giving what is basically a maximum. If you were going to distribute what you would feel would be nearly unlimited amount of charity. Excuse me. What would you do? Okay, what would you do to follow the halacha accurately? So we quoted this Gemara a few times. And it says the following. The rabbis made a takana and usha. They made an enactment. Someone who wishes to part with large amounts of money should not part with more than 20%. Because they might come to need help from others themselves. Okay? They might, let's call it nitztarech lebrios, meaning you yourself will become impoverished. Okay, so they made a rule that it is well intentioned to give up to 20% because you don't want to become poor yourself. And they add the following clause or condition: in lo mi shehu ashir muflag. If not, that this person is exceptionally wealthy. All right, they're making a condition for exceptional. They don't explain what this. So it seems like the exceptionally wealthy person is exempt. Okay, so some people seem to be that, that there is just a person that is just exceptionally wealthy. Also, a person right before they pass away, they are also exempt from giving the 20% limit because they're not going to need it. Okay, so they can give more than that. So this is brought down in Yoredeah 249.1. Okay. So a person right before they pass away, they can go ahead and distribute all kinds of money to poverty, to those who are in poverty, and those that have, and to those institutions that need the help. Okay. And some people put a limit on that. He says that even it's limited to maybe a half or a third. Okay, why? Because we find that in a similar case, that Mar Ukva, right before his passing, he dedicated to the local charity a lot of money right before the end of his days, because he said that the path is long and tzedakah is easy. Okay, and half of my money to tzedakah. So he didn't give all of his money. So they say that was a point that you could violate the takana, the enactment, up until half. Okay, so the Ahavas Chaim here, the author himself, he says we need to make a distinction between tzedakah itself, where you have a lot of poor people standing right here. Right? The poor are in front of you. You see the poverty. Because the Torah says you have to give what's called day machsora, which we mentioned previously in our last class. Okay, so which is something that's required to, and also money that's required to go to the holy places of the Jewish people. Okay, which those type of things are. It's a type of tzedakah. You're not required the same way as you are to provide for the basic necessities of another Jew. Okay, so it's good to do that, but it's not the same level of requirement as for tzedakah. So, in a way, I want to point out, says the author, that giving charity to the poor is much more important than giving to holy places. Okay, so if you had one type to pick from, and they don't really need you, then you really should be focusing your money to the poor. Okay? As long as you don't exceed your own tzedakah limits we mentioned earlier of the fifth of the chomesh, the 20%. So a question comes up is when we say that there's so many people that want to give all of their money, that would be when you see poverty around you. You see people starving, you see people they can't eat, they can't drink. But nonetheless, your life comes first, so that's why you can't give more than a certain amount. So that's why you need to go ahead and give to them, and then it stops because you need to save for yourself. Okay? A person should not be giving away all of their money, even though it seems to be that there is a lot of need. Okay? So really what we find is that a person should be cautious and aware of what they're doing to give their money. So it's good that they feel that they want to do it, but they shouldn't feel as if they have to make a decision on their own. The rabbis of the Talmud recognized that you have to set limits and boundaries on these type of things. So you should always give up until it's too much. And the language used in the Mishnah is if you're literally scattering and there's lots of people in front of you, you're throwing money to them. Okay, that's what the language means. And if you're looking for more, you should stop at 20%. Okay, that a person should not be looking to give to more than that. But let's say you have more people than there seems to be. Well, and according to one explanation, specifically of the Rambam, you might be able to give a little bit more because there is a mitzvah of Dei Machsoro. And so there you might be able to give a little bit more than what we said. And what were some examples over there? So they talk about a couple of cases that one guy went ahead and gave over his field as a gift. Okay. And he didn't have any other fields. And, in that case, that would have been more than 1/5. But the truth is that, he seemed to be okay beyond what he had. Another explanation we're going to go into now, this is the second explanation of what it means. Don't spread your money thin beyond 20%. Also means when you want to give from your account and to go give them to charity. However, there is this requirement of Dei Machsoro, which we have mentioned. So if a person comes to you, the 20% limit doesn't count. Why? Because a person, if you were able to give them their sort of their minimum survival needs, their minimum amount of charity to feel like a human being, so that's in between tzedakah and pikuach nefesh. Okay, it's not pikuach nefesh meaning it's almost nature to the life. So if a person was actually, let's say they were trapped somewhere and they were in danger of dying, or they were stuck somewhere and it's very dangerous and they could perish somehow where it was from, maybe they could die from starvation and you have to get to them soon because they've been trapped somewhere for a long time without access to the normal amenities in the regular world. So in those cases, we don't limit your ability to do that. Okay? So we're trying to set this limit of 20% only in cases where a person has sort of normal course of business, normal course of interactions, would encounter a normal number of poor cases. But in cases where it's dire, there may not be this limit. So there are other examples too of why they also set that. So some people say the limit of 20% does actually apply to Pidyon Shvuyim, which we'll get to in a second. So, but we're not going to deal with that here right now. And this third thing that the author mentions is that when they said to not give out more than 20%, that was to say the money that belongs to your house. Okay, meaning the household is considered deserving of a certain amount of standard of living. Okay, and it should not come to impugn that standard. Okay, so the idea of not to go into it. If you need something for your house, and it could be an issue of tzedakah, and it's some type of need for it, or some type of regular expense. Okay, you can do that. So a person, if a person works a little harder, they can make a little more, then you can give a little more. Okay, so even if that comes slightly above the 20%. So the whole point is that it's only if you're at a fixed value, but if you could work a little more and earn a little more, right? You spend you spend an extra 10 minutes in the shower thinking about your case if you're a lawyer, and you bill the client. Okay, that could be another case where you could give a little more tzedakah. Fourth thing he says is that an arrangement of stopping at chomesh, stopping at 20%, is for your general tzedakah needs. However, we learned earlier that to strengthen Torah learning, we quoted the Shita Mikubetzes, that this limit doesn't apply. Okay, and also in a person's own the value of what they get out of their own learning. Okay, so that, for example, Yisachar and Zvulun was engaged in business, and Yisachar was engaged in Torah learning. That Zvulun would really give more to Yisachar in order to get some of the value and the benefit of the reward for learning Torah. And the Midrash Rabbah says this as well. It's Midrash Rabbah on Parshas Naso. It's Parsha Yud Gimel Yud Zayin. So it's B'midbar Rabbah. Okay, so why did Zvulun come number 3 when it came to bringing all of the sacrifices at the dedication of the Mishkan? They came together. You have Yehuda. Yehuda's a big one. The number 3 is Zvulun. Why? Because they taught about loving Torah. And they gave so much money to Yisachar to learn as much Torah as possible, in order that they wouldn't have to go look for sustenance elsewhere, and not stop engaging in Torah learning. And therefore, Zvulun was a partner in the Torah learning of Yisachar. That's one explanation. Another explanation to address. So it says there was a plate opposite the bread, and they would feed one from this plate, okay? And there was a fork opposite the wine, and they would lift it. They would lift it in order to help him get the water to drink. So why do they make these things, the karos, the mizrakos? Why do they make them out of silver? And why were they compared to bread and wine? So they said, just like by silver, a person could go ahead and engage all of their needs from silver, and therefore you would use the value of that. And then also in the offerings, it says that the baskets were full of fine flour, and they also had the wine. And so the point was that both Yisachar and Zvulun took the reward for learning Torah together. Okay, and that's what this sacrifice and these offerings all meant for them. Just like Zvulun wanted to be a partner in the Torah learning, Yisachar was also a partner in the money of Zvulun. And these things are all discussed in great detail in that 13th chapter over there. It's actually a very interesting section of the Midbar Rabbah. This is meta commentary. They go through in there, the rabbis of the Midrash go through the meaning of the different korbanos, the different offerings to each one of the shvatim, to each one of the tribes. Even though it's the same offering, it meant something different to everybody.
So when we learn from this, says the Chafetz Chaim in his back into his authorship here in the book, that it was great to give them all this stuff because it kept the Torah strong, and it was certainly more than this 20% that we've been talking about. So therefore, there's a lot of places where the 20% rule didn't apply. Okay? So, and because why? Because you yourself are getting something out of it. So since you are getting value out of it, it's different. That's different. So he also points out in a footnote over here, he says, we should also for the Midrash how important it is for someone who is a person who is in awe of Hashem to see how important it is to be a partner in Torah learning. Okay, and so therefore the point is to continue to be partner with people who learn Torah and who spread it out to others. And with a great many sins, says the Chafetz Chaim, there's a number of people who lack faith in giving to Torah establishments, and people think that it is the depraved thing to contribute to, and they only give a little bit of money, and they're angry at to give to it. And the way in which a person gives the tzedakah is how Chas v'Shalom Hashem will mete out back to him, and a wise person should take this to heart. That's the end of the note. He quotes another midrash from Koheles Rabbah. It says that Koheles, it says, and I have hated all the work I have done under the sun. Okay, so it's in the second chapter of Koheles, the 18th pasuk. Okay, so, they tell us about Rebbe Meir. It says, Rebbe Meir was a very good sofer, and he used to earn about the value of 3 selah every week. Okay? So those three amounts of money went to 3 things. With one amount of the money, he could eat. Okay. With the second amount, he could pay for clothing. And with the third, he gave it to help other people learn Torah. So his students asked him, Rebbe, what about your kids? Right? So he said, "Oh, so if they're going to be righteous, then they'll be like everybody else, okay? So they'll get money from the Torah learning, which was and what does the end of the pasuk say? V'lo ra'ishi sadik ne'azav v'zar mevakesh lachem, which we say mentioning all the time. We will not see the righteous person bereft of all his needs and his children needing food." So that's Rebbe Meir's answer. He says, it'll be like you guys. Somehow we'll get money. Okay? And if not, so, why would I be leaving my money to people who didn't believe in such things? So that's the Rebbe Meir give a lot of money to people learning Torah. It says further in Midrash Koheles that a person should learn and a person should keep the things that he's learned. And if a person's not sure, then they're not sure whether to keep it or not to keep it. Well, then here's what they compare it to. It's mentioned in the curses at Har Gerizim, right? It says, "Aver asher lo yakim es divrei haTorah hazos." So you won't keep it. There was a curse uttered for you as we went to the land of Israel. Lo lama v'lo limad v'lo shamar v'lo asaf. So that's important to hear the Hebrew on that, because you neither learn nor teach nor keep nor do, right? You do nothing. So why don't you do it? So the Chafetz Chaim points out probably because you're poor, and that's why you don't do it. So then the person eventually finds a way to keep it. Then he's going to be placed into the next verse, which is, "Blessed are those who keep it." Okay, and those are uttered on Har Ebal, on the mountain of Ebal. Why? Because everything that is cursed is also included in the blessing. What does that mean? The Chafetz Chaim comments. He says, we learn a very important thing about those who strengthen the learning and keeping of Torah. that in a moment of great need for themselves, if a person is blessed, it's through the blessing, it's through this blessing. And so too, if they find that they have been cursed, it's through the lack of keeping it. And therefore, how much the more so, the person should strengthen themselves in the midst of tzedakah, that if they find that things are difficult, they should keep on focusing on learning themselves. Now, he seems to be aiming this not to people who are actually learning, but people who would just be earning. If a person is actually learning, they should focus themselves on the learning, much like we said by Rabbi Meir, where he himself would teach and give some of what he had in order to maintain the ability of everyone to teach. Now he says that in section 5 over here, we're going to go back to our main point. And we have only 2 more parts here. We have the 5th part and the 6th part to finish the chapter. He says, the original takana that we made, we can understand something very important, which is how much a person should be careful about how much money they have. That the person should not be throwing away their money to every ridiculous thing. Okay, certain things should be said up at the highest highs, that the person should be focusing their money towards doing other mitzvos. And the person should be looking to sustain themselves and to save themselves from all types of calamities in this world and in the next. And that's why a person should keep track of what's going on with their money and not just throw them out wantonly. So that way they shouldn't become poor themselves. Even though sometimes Hashem will take pity on them. That person should probably even get some blessing that's above and beyond derech hateva, the natural flow of things. So how much the more so that a person should be careful that they shouldn't be spending their money wantonly, on trying to aggrandize themselves. And meaning, so, you should be buying the most expensive clothing, and you shouldn't try to oversell yourself, and to live in a super expensive house, and to try to have so many people serving you, and have the nicest utensils, right? And I'm gonna meta comment over here, and you buy the most expensive appliances, and you put the fanciest thing on your doors, right? And you have Sentry units all across the house, right? He's saying you gotta have a little sense with what's going on with your money. That's what we should learn from this. That we talk about spending money wantonly on tzedakah. Think about what you're spending it on yourself. You shouldn't feel like somehow someone's going to come and save you when this all doesn't work out, because then you're basically treating other people's money as if it's somehow owed to you, like it doesn't have any real ownership itself. And you're going to need that because of your own crushing poverty as a result of it. And he says, I know what it is that your Yetzer Hara is telling you. It tricks a person and convinces them at the first instant that these things help your parnasa, which is that a person would consider themselves rich, and they believe themselves, based on their access to money, that they could do things. But this is also not true, because the whole world knows this is a folly, and people are going to look into their finances, and until they're going to find out that this person really just throws their money away, that their money is spread out to the craziest things in the world, and not things like in tzedakah. And so forth. And furthermore, when it comes to their own children, when they see the conduct they have in their house, they think that the most important thing is to be rich. What message are you sending to the kids? That the most important thing is to be rich, or to act rich, or to live rich? Okay, so that's why we're saying that you should be careful about where you're throwing your money to, especially if you want to go ahead and spread it out to lots of people. But don't spread it to crazy things until you basically barely hang on by a thread. And suddenly you'll see at the end of this road what destruction lies ahead. They can all be left behind and all be destroyed. Until it can even come to a situation, God forbid, that a person become so bereft and so distraught that it could become even dangerous to their own person and even dangerous to their own family. and increase the amount of difficulty that's included. And the embarrassment from all of the people who they're going to see from all of their creditors that will surround them and try to collect all the money from them too. And underneath all of the expressions of joy that they'd have, they're going to be reaching a very, very low point, because they were convinced at the very first that they had the ability to avoid this, and now they're going to see such destruction and so much melancholy for all of the things that they tried to give themselves for enjoyment. So therefore, the wise person should have some eyes in his head. A person should not be throwing their money away to so many ridiculous things. Only those things that they really need, and also to things that are for tzedakah and so on. And that'll be better for them. Last thought in this section, and that's he says that a person should be very careful with their meiser and with their chomesh, okay, from everything that they profit. Okay, so it's so important for their own righteousness that they take a look at how much they are giving to tzedakah just in general, and if others are giving like them, and also people who are giving lots of tzedakah. That's assuming they only have the mitzvah tzedakah, but their business as well. It's not performing any better than the amount of tzedakah they're giving. But for someone whose their business is also to do things that are for heavenly purposes, then that type of business, okay, that person is going to have an even greater effect, because this is a business that is focusing on performing a mitzvah. And so if a person is looking to perform this mitzvah in order to sustain the mitzvah properly, and also to give tithes and lots of tzedakah, so that's really, a person is really dedicating their whole endeavors to Hashem, and that's even better. And how wonderful that type of investment is. We are almost done with part 2. This is part 21. We have only a few more parts left in part 2. We finished through 24, and that will then bring us to part 3, which is going to talk about guests. But we were almost done talking about what to do with the money. So then we're going to learn next week. Our next installment is going to talk about people who have really become super destitute, and what's to do for them. We mentioned it briefly and in passing here, and we've talked a lot about it. So a lot about tzedakah. So we're going to really instruct ourselves even further in this next section for next week. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful day.